Hi, Halim.
Hi, Reverend Terry.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm fine. Yeah, it's a nice day today. It's not
Yeah,
too hot, not too cold.
yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
I was thinking Tuesday was the 1 year anniversary of the death of George Floyd in Minnesota, an event that really rocked this country. And the United States has a long, complicated history with the idea of white superiority and racism. And so this summer, Christ Church is going to begin to use the Episcopal Church's course called Sacred Ground to help us understand how we've been impacted by the systems of oppression and the way it's been embedded in all of our institutions, including the church. So at some point, you and I will have a conversation observing that work in our little video series. But for today, I want to go back and talk about that time you visited in 2018 when we were just discerning whether or not we were going to work together. And while you were here, you and I went to the Arab American Museum. And I really appreciated when we were there that you could fill in gaps in the history. I mean, it's your area, it's your region, so you know the history really well, and you could fill in all these gaps of information. So I found that really I mean, I love history, so I found that really fascinating. But one of the things that's kind of struck me ever since that I think about quite a bit is the idea that when a person immigrates to this country or comes here with a visa for school or whatever, that the census status that they have to fill out to enter the country, the only option for a person from the Middle East is to mark themselves as Caucasian. There's not a category for people from the Middle East like there is for Hispanic people or Asian people or indigenous people. And so I think that that's something really, I think that's just really peculiar because it seems like you kind of get lost. Like we have no way of honoring or recognizing that there are people here from the Middle East.
Yeah, thank you for this observation, Reverend Terry. And I still remember our beautiful visit. I enjoyed so much to be in the Arab American Museum. And I invite everyone who are watching this video, if they haven't visited the museum, to visit it, because it will give you a lot about the history of the immigration and how people came here to the country and the
Yeah,
immigrants.
yeah,
Uh, and you are right, and especially for someone for me who has immigrant and come to the country, and how to categorize myself and how to give an identity to myself. Because I struggled with this when I was in the seminary. I still remember in my first year in the seminary, I was invited to attend a conference for the seminarians of color.
mm,
And I told my friend, who is American white, friend, he was very close friend for mine. He said, "Are you going to this conference?" I thought this was for the whole seminary. He said, "No, because I am not colored. You are colored." I said, "Why? Why do you mean that I am colored?" He said, "Yes, I am white and you are colored." I said, "But I am white. I identify myself as a white." So although like I have a brown, but you are right, as to be in the Middle East or a Caucasian, you are in the category of white. Maybe
mhm,
the brown and the white, but in our culture, it's so similar. Unless that you are black or an African, that mean that this. But the other all the categories or the Asian people or this, they are all in the category of white. So our basket in our culture, the white basket is much larger.
yeah,
So here to come and find myself like I am colored, and then I started learning about how things are, you know, uh, to be in this category. So if I am in the census that I am Caucasian and white, but I am treated as a person of color, so how can I identify myself? So I think you are right. There should be an identity that these people are either they are Arabs or Middle Eastern. And I think it's also, if we also have an identity more for an Arab, it will be much easier, because also the Iranians or the Turks, if they will also identify themselves as a Middle Eastern. And but then to be in the more category and the broader category, I think if there will be in the census more a category about an Arabs or a clear thing when you mention that you are a Middle Eastern, that you can also specify what does it mean, because it helps a lot uh, in the senses, and it helps a lot uh, in doing the work, and how to identify the communities and to help the communities here, or especially the Arab and the Middle Eastern community here in the country.
Yes, and so I even think about recently, well, maybe not recently, but sometime in the last couple of months on the news, they were talking about the challenges here in Dearborn with trying to reach out to the Arab-speaking communities because the census doesn't identify them. People are harder to find, but they wanted to reach out because there was a need to make sure people were getting proper information and getting the vaccine. So and that was they were the question was really how to do this the most effective way, and they didn't have an answer for that. I recall when I saw that little episode on the news. But what I know happened afterwards, or sometime in that same time frame, was all the mosques, or many of the mosques, began to be the places where people could go and get vaccines. They became vaccine sites. And myself, I went to the Islamic Center of America to get my vaccine when they opened it up there, and it was through Henry Ford Hospital System. But it was a community of people who could all speak Arabic, and so they were really and English, but speak Arabic, so they were really prepared to meet the questions and the concerns of the population, and I think that's a real need that gets lost when we sort of start lumping people into categories that doesn't help us see the full picture of who people are.
Yeah, thank you. And I think also for me, as I'm as also, and I think a lot of people, also the immigrants from the Middle East or the Arab immigrants, still, when we talk about racism and how it's identified here in the country, it's when you talk here in the United States about racism, so you see either white or black. Yeah, this is the picture that comes to your mind. But there are also layers of racism also against persons of color or Asian Americans or something. And also back in the Middle East, we people have suffered a lot from the racism, but it's not built only on color.
Mm,
Maybe it's for the community. Maybe we can talk later about the color, how it's treated in the culture in the Middle East. But mostly when we talk about racism, and especially because, like, I will give you an example. Lebanon is very diverse in religion,
mhm.
but you are identified by your religion identity. So
Ah,
either you are Muslim, or Muslim you should be identified either you are Muslim Sunni or Muslim Shia. If you are a Druze, if you are Christian, either you are a Christian, you are a Maronite, or you are Greek Orthodox, or you are evangelical, or you are Episcopal. So even in the Lebanese, before the war ended in the 1990, our personal ID card, it has a category for religion. So either you identify that you are, what are your sects also. And
yeah.
for this reason, a lot of people have been killed because of that. There was this conflict in Lebanon, and then it will become in the civil war. So if people were kidnapped, and you can show your ID, and you will be killed because on the base of your religion. So this was a big racism and the people who struggled. And I think for the people, and especially also for other Christians in the Middle East who come here to the United States, because in other countries on the Middle East where Islam is a predominant religion, Christians feel themselves that are second-class citizens. And so this is also a kind of racism. When you find it's not only a classism, but also because you are identified by your religion. If you are Christian, you feel yourself that you are a second-class citizen, because you cannot have a prominent governmental position, or to be in the army, or to have a certain things that to do. So you are limited. And this is also a struggle. So no, so what I find out in my conversation, especially from the people who are coming from the Middle East, when we talk about racism in the American context, it creates for us a little bit of confusion, because it's only based on color, and but also in our culture there are a lot of layers
Yeah.
when we talk about racism.
So it makes me think of the book that the bishop is having us read right now called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, because in there by using the word caste instead of racism, she's expanding the concept of including the sort of the American way of understanding racism through skin color, but expanding it to look at other ways in which we categorize people and cast them into segments of society and then prioritize who's got, who's the dominant culture, who's the one that has the power over others, based more on like a caste system. I'm only about halfway through the book, but it's an interesting way to think about it as well as we try to navigate these complex systems that we've created in this world as human beings, right? I mean, in our heart, where we are very much made up the same way
Yeah.
as human beings. We do have lots of differences, and it's important to value those differences because the differences, I think, enrich the world. And the Celtic understanding, as I do some reading with John O'Donohue, is that God's divine imagination, God created diversity because God doesn't like repetition. God likes diversity.
Yeah.
So I think there's something beautiful about the idea that in our great diversity, how and all the very different ways in which human beings express themselves, are born and created and made in this world, that there's something that is really reveals the deeper context of who God is, and the beauty of God and the richness of that diversity.
Yeah, and you are right, Reverend Terry, because in this diversity, there is a lot of we learn from the diversity, and
Yeah,
it will brings beauty. And as much, imagine that you are walking in a garden that has only one kind of flowers or only one kind of trees. It will be so boring, and the whole and all the story has started in the Garden of Eden. I can imagine how beauty the garden with all the flowers, the trees, and every kind of animals, and
yeah,
even human beings.
right.
The whole creation has been in diversity, and as much as we respect that diversity and not cast people according only to this, put them in a boxes. First of all, if we categorize people in a box, this will limit our communication with each, because we look at the other person as only like you are doing a certain work. I'll give you an example. So when also I was in the seminary, there was a visiting professor came to talk about sculptures and art, and was talking in a way that we need to draw Jesus in a Middle Eastern, picture or figure. And she was talking about this, and I was so happy. But then she said, yeah, maybe you haven't met a lot of Middle Eastern people in your life, but you will have that chance if you have been riding an Uber. But that at that meet, and then I raised my hand. I said, "But I am from the Middle East. And I am here in the class." you know, I know that she has a good intention. To
But
but
but there's a case in point, right, of
yeah,
categorizing people as if
yeah,
they're
yeah,
all going to
and
be.
I'll
Yeah,
give you like also the example in
yeah.
like also in Lebanon. So people who are from who came from Africa as either in student or workers in Lebanon. In Lebanon, they are always categorized as they are workers, like
Mm,
they work in construction or something, or come from Africa. And the women who are African, especially the Ethiopian, because they work as housemaids or house helpers. So every you see a woman with a black skin, that means that either you put her in this category that she's a maid,
Yeah.
or because also a lot of Filipinos work as a house helper. So also the Asians are always categorized in this. So this is and and there was a very famous story in the news in one of because in Lebanon, a lot of these, fancy resorts, the fancy resorts, they don't allow the housemaid to go to the swimming pool.
Yeah.
So they keep, only with their children, but they don't allow them to go to the water.
Uh,
So this is very big discrimination.
mhm.
There was in the news when an Asian woman came and she was in the water, and then the lifeguards, he said, "You are not allowed to come here." But she was a university professor who was invited to come to Lebanon to a lecture. You see how when we put the people in a category, it blinds us to see only in this. And I think it needs a lot of education, a lot of
Yeah.
work, and as you mentioned, when we respect the diversity and we see the beauty in this diversity, will encourage us to learn more and more about each other.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Those are interesting thoughts. I mean, you and I are on a path of learning about how the systems of oppression have impacted our different lives. You know, my life from growing up here white in the United States and you growing up in Lebanon. So we're learning about it. So we're just having this little conversation. We're not trying to be experts in this at all, but just kind of sharing our own little experiences, and then to reflect on the importance of being able to see our similarities as human beings and also value our differences and the way in which those really can enrich our experience of life. Certainly, I've found that the time, you know, you and I've been working together almost 3 years, and it's been a very rich experience for me to hear and learn from you about the life and culture that you grew up in and the way in which you are working with the very diverse culture of Mother of the Savior, because although they come from the Middle East, they come from many different countries and they aren't all the same. I mean, even, you know, we kind of lump everybody as Middle Eastern as if they're all the same, and they're not. Even amongst, you know, so they're from Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, uh, Palestine, Old Jerusalem, Egypt. I mean, all very different,
Yes.
very different. And so it's helpful for us to see those differences and then to really value them. So,
Thank you so much,
yeah,
Reverend Terry.
thank
I
you. Thank you,
appreciate it
Halim.
for this time. And as much as said, we learn from each other and we come to appreciate our diversity. Thank you so
So
much.
we'll have more conversations soon. Thank you, Halim. Take
Thank you.
care.
Thank you. You too.